Joining us to preview the New York Rangers against the Pittsburgh Penguins is the host of the Sports Box, and that is Brian Attard. Brian, welcome. How are you?
Living the dream, guys. How are you?
We're doing great. Thank you so much for joining us. And you host the Blue Truth part of the Sports Box, right? The Ranger.
Yes, one of the many hats that I wear as part of the Sports Box Network. So I have my normal Tuesday night show is Highly Opinionated with my partner Mike. We do a variety of NFL stuff, but my pet project is Blue Truth, talking all Rangers all the time, which, you know, you get on there for an hour and it feels like 10 minutes, which is what this is going to feel like, I'm sure. So this is the best time of the year, guys, and we're back. We are back in the postseason for the first time in years, and it's exciting.
Yeah, and I was going to start with that. I was like, when you entered this season, first year coach Gerald Gallant, what are your really expectations as the season starts compared to now entering the postseason?
I thought they were a playoff team from the jump. I thought the last couple of years, if you go back to the COVID shortened year, the year where they got in from the qualifying round, which isn't really the playoffs, but whatever. Yeah. Had that gone on, they probably get in on their own. Not like they probably get in, right? And then last year, I think that they would have been a playoff team in a normal schedule. So they were very much like a finesse type team last season. Obviously, they went to more grit, and that's well documented. But when you kept playing the same teams over and over again, it was nuclear war for months. The Rangers weren't really built for that. If you played last year's team with a normal schedule, they probably sneak into the playoffs. But then again, this year you see where they are, and the youth playing massive roles. And then this, Hank will know this. They play the song at the end of Games at the Garden, and there's a line in there that says, "We'll build it better than we did before. We are the people we've been waiting for." And really, it fits this team to a T. Like, you look at the storyline arc of the letter and the sell-off and the trades and everything else, and how everybody just bought into that. Like, there wasn't anyone who said, "Oh, this is not going to work." And look, ping pong balls make great general managers. Thank God for that. But everything you could have asked for, they are ahead of schedule by anybody's definition of where they thought they would be by now. No, I thought they'd be a playoff team, like a wild card team out in the first round, and I would have been perfectly fine with that. I had no expectations from that. But I mean, look at the way the season has gone, and here you are. Now you kind of think, well, what is the road to get there? To me, they've exceeded expectations to this point. I think that those expectations have to change now with the case that you're in.
Yeah, for sure. Go ahead, Hank.
So, yeah, I think one of the things, I know we talked about this a lot, like during the season, whether it be us in person at the Garden or whether you had me as a guest on Blue Truth. Thank you for that, by the way. That was a lot of fun. So I think
it's all on this side of the table.
I appreciate it. So one of the things we discussed was like, they were a talented team, but we all like thought that they could have done more. And we both pretty much agreed that Igor carried the team. What do you think about the trades during the deadline? Do you think that really changed the team? Because let me tell you right now, I thought the Rangers were pretty much a different team after that deadline.
Well, what happens is you put actual NHL talent in your bottom six, and all of a sudden things look better. And what I loved about what they did at the deadline is, look, they didn't move anybody who was irreplaceable. They didn't move their first round pick. There was all this talk of, would they try to trade Kravtsov when his value was low? Would they move on from Nils Lundqvist, who didn't really pan out this year? Would they trade their one? They didn't really do any of that. The most they gave up was 2 2s for Andrew Kopp. That's worked out tremendously. Really just under the radar type stuff, right? So you had the teams like Florida really mortgaging their future to try to make a run right now. I think Drury knows where this team was. This is not their best iteration. That's still coming. So yeah, I mean, look, you owe it to your boys to do what you can to try to give them the best shot. I don't think look, he took a lot of flack for the Buchnevich trade, and rightfully so. I mean, I think that was done because they don't want to risk losing him for nothing, the way they might lose Reinstrom for nothing now. And they couldn't trade him at this deadline because then what are you telling your team? So I understand why that deal was made. Didn't agree with it then, don't agree with it now. Dead issue. What they did at the deadline was very low-risk type stuff, low-cost type stuff. Frank Vetrano for a fourth. I mean, everything that they've done has worked swimmingly. Give the guy credit. He had the pulse of his team at the deadline, and he gave them the pieces that they needed. And they look like a completely different team from that point on. The analytics, for those of you who care, I know some don't, whatever. have been tremendously different after that. Like, it's not the same. Yes, look, Shesterkin's important. I'm not going to apologize for having the Vezina winner in net. I've been part of this movie before since the mid 2000s. I know what it's like, but they defend much better. Their structure is much better. They have better 5-on-5 numbers. It's a different team. So a lot of the criticisms that they relied so much on Igor, which were true in the first half of the year, they haven't had to as much. Some of that might be who they've played, but you don't make your schedule. Again, a lot of the questions have been answered. Now it's, can you do it in the playoffs?
Yeah, absolutely. And, Chris Kreider having a career year with 52 goals, Artemi Panarin with 96 points. I mean, all the big guys. I mean, we talk about even Mika Zibanejad, he's been there as well. So, I think one of the words you use with this team, and I think you brought it up too, is depth. Frank Vatrano, they brought in as a depth piece, and he's been fantastic since he's gone here. So they can go 3-4 lines deep. They can go 2-3 pairings deep. So, it really is. It really seems like, wow, this has been a magical year. This actually also seems like a year where they really could go make a deep run.
I think it depends how it breaks. I'm sure we're going to talk about the series that they're in. Assuming they get through that, depending what happens in Boston and Carolina, if things break right, they could find themselves in the conference finals again. And that's, if you think of this team and you compare it spot for spot to the 12 team and the 14 team and the 15 team, those teams that were set up to make those long runs. If the goaltending is roughly the same, and Hank Lundqvist, not Hank Indictor.
Yeah, no, of course.
Says that Igor is more his technique is better than Hank's. Thank you. I'll take your word on it. From a talent perspective, this Ranger team this year is way better than those teams. I mean, those teams, I remember that in 12, if they were down 1-0, the game was over. Like, you didn't think they were going to be able to score goals. That is not a problem this team has with their offensive firepower. So, again, the expectations change, and I think that it's going to be really interesting to see how they do now that the pressure is on. It's not regular season hockey anymore.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think it's been amazing what they've gotten in the second half. And one of the other things that's been a strong point this year was the power play. It was probably near the top of the league. Yeah. Obviously, it tailed off a little bit in the second half. I think that could probably be a big difference in those playoff games now.
So here's not to jump into the series, but here's the thing, right? They've lived and died on their power play for most of the year, right? So they've been lethal. I mean, again, a ton of talent that you can put out there. Kreider he's become Adam Graves 2.0 in front of the net. It's wonderful to see. It's exactly like you get those shades of 94 sometimes, like Adam Fox being a Brian Leetch clone in many, many ways, if you remember him playing. And there you go. And you see that, right? So the problem is you live and die by the sword. My biggest fear going into the postseason is you're not going to get the calls you got in March and February and January in May. So if you have to rely on your man advantage to score and you don't get that many chances to, now you have to be able to get goals elsewhere. And I think that their 5-on-5 play is really, again, since the deadline has gotten much, much better, that needs to translate, or they will not make any sort of a run. They might be, on the outs very early.
Yeah. Talking with Brian Attard, host of the Sports Box here on Game On. Brian, so let's dive into this Rangers Penn series. And, we were discussing a lot, what would be a better matchup for the Rangers, if it's the Penguins or the Capitals. But you look at this Penguins team and, obviously when you think of the Penguins, the first names you think of are Sidney Crosby, Evgeny Malkin, Chris Letang. But, one of the first, the thing that I zone in on in this series right now as a start is the goaltending matchup. We talked about obviously Shesterkin, who's probably going to be a Vezina winner. I mean, you can even make the case he could even be a Hart Trophy winner with how great he's been this year. But when you look at the Penguins here, they're dealing with an injury to their starting. It looks like Casey DeSmith is going to be starting instead of Tristan Jarry for at least the first 2 games, they're saying. So when you look at the goaltending matchup, and what do you think about that as part of this series upcoming starting later tonight?
So if you remember, when the last time these two teams played in the playoffs was 2016, and a goalie by the name of Jeff Zatkoff started games 1 and 2 for Pittsburgh, and the Rangers split those games. They ended up losing the series in 5, which I kind of thought they would. They weren't really the team that year. Look, it's an epic mismatch in goal, but it's one that the Rangers need to exploit, right? So you're going to get elite level goaltending from your goaltender. We know this. That's what he is. He will win the Vezina. He should win the Hart. And in a year where you don't have a 60-goal scorer in the mecca of hockey in Canada, he probably does. But it is what it is. Not going to be too concerned there. They have the advantage there. But that's where that 5-on-5 scoring has to come from. So you have to, if they're going to get that advantage, at least in the first 2 games. And look, Jari was rather awful in the playoffs last year. I mean, you could really make the case he was the reason that Pittsburgh lost to the Islanders, especially that overtime gaff. And I think it was game 5. So like, it's not as if you're going up against, Ken Dryden when he's playing, but again, it is an advantage. It's not their guy. The same way Boston's playing against Antti Raanta, Carolina's backup. You have to make them pay for that. Use that advantage while you can, because if, let's say, you split the first 2 games, they get Jari back, they get some momentum from that, it could easily go the other way. But at the same time, Smith's not a bad goaltender, not Tristan Jari's numbers, but again, you have to make them pay. It's not nobody's fault somebody got hurt, but it is what it is.
Yeah, no, I agree, especially given our track record against backup goalies. I mean,
and that's another thing. I think it's either McCaff or the guys at Blue Shirt Underground who say you can bring like a random guy from Penn Station, like underground, can go play backup. The emergency backup goalie.
Yeah, exactly. No, that's always given me nightmares over the years. But I think one of the big things that that the series will probably come down to, I agree with you 100%, is the goaltending, because oftentimes, and I think I've probably left a few comments like that on your show.
Sure.
Usually playoff series are like low scoring games. And ultimately at the end of the day, if you're going to win low scoring game, that would have to be the guy in front of the net, Igor Shesterkin.
No, absolutely. I mean, we talk about how good their penalty kill is. He is their penalty kill. Okay. Like let's not mince words here. Like we have this advantage. I'm not going to apologize for having the best goalie in the world at the moment. My biggest concern here is that, again, we talk about the Rangers' power play being such a strength of the team, what they rely on to get a lot of their offensive pressure. Pittsburgh is the second least penalized team in the game.
Yes. With the number 1 penalty kill.
Now, is that a chicken or the egg type thing? Like, is your PK actually that good, or do you just not get enough calls on you to make it a weakness?
Right.
Crosby and Malkin have been, criticized as crybabies and this and that for as long, since the cavemen roamed the earth. So this is not anything new. That's probably your biggest fear as a Ranger fan. Because again, like I said, it works both ways. It's a great strength, but when it's your main strength and it doesn't work, you're in trouble. So to me, that's the series in a nutshell. If the Rangers can get 5-on-5 scoring, especially from the middle 6, this could be a short series. If they are too reliant on their upper end, that when they get those 5 guys out on their power play, which again, lethal, it cannot be your only source of offense. Yes, make them pay when they take a penalty, but you can't sit there and wait for a call against a team that doesn't. It's not that they don't take penalties. It's for whatever reason the NHL doesn't choose to call penalties on the Pittsburgh Penguins. So it is what it is. It going in. So be aware of it.
Yeah, I can already hear the fix your skirt Sydney chants down here.
He's just phenomenal player. Like
there's no question.
One of the all-time greats on the ice. I don't, no further.
The thing is with the Penguins also, as we talked to Brian Attard here on the show, look besides Crosby, Malkin, and Letang. I mean, who else are you really looking at on the Penguins side to really be a factor?
Jay Gensel, bar none. Mm-hmm. Jay Gensel's a 40-goal scorer. There's so many weird storylines to this series. It's very much the ghost of Christmas past versus the ghost of Christmas future, in that this might be the last gasp for the Penguins as we know them. So again, Malkin's 34. He's going to be UFA in the summer. Time catch up to everybody. Crosby's got a couple of years left. Letang's been through the wars. They've changed goaltenders, Fleury to Murray to now, this group. Like at some point you can't keep band-aiding a gunshot. Like they're going to eventually have to let it go and bleed out and, do what the Rangers did.
The Rangers did. Exactly.
Which worked for the Rangers, right? So whereas the Rangers are ahead of schedule, Pittsburgh might actually just be kind of running on fumes here. Look, both of these teams have not won a playoff series in the past 3 years. Okay. Pittsburgh's actually made it the past 3 years, haven't got out of the first round. The Rangers have been in a full-fledged rebuild. So the results have been the same for the most part. That's pressure on Sydney. That's pressure on that team. Like, they're not going to come in and just die. It is the matchup Rangers fans wanted. I mean, we all we're talking for weeks into this. Like, do you really want to jump Carolina? Because then you might play Tampa Bay or Boston. Would you rather just play Pittsburgh? And you've owned Pittsburgh. I mean, they've played 4 games. They've won 3 of them. The one they lost 1-0. So it's not as if at no point has Pittsburgh dominated this team. The Rangers have been the better team for the most part. It's the matchup that you want. But if I'm afraid of anybody, it is Jay Gensel. Again, a 40-goal scorer, led that team in goals this year. A guy nobody talks about because you're always talking about the Crosbys and the Malkins and the guys that, are the headline names in Pittsburgh. That kid is very, very good. He could be an X factor because, again, if they're too focused on the big names, he will make you pay, especially on the power play. And they will get their chances on the power play.
I think the only other name that I would even fear, if only because he's a former Ranger, is Brian Boyle. But then again, that's him and Jeff Carter. Like, they've been there, done that before, but they're really not guys I fear as much as, say, a Crosby or, like you said, a young 40-year-old or young 40-goal scorer named Gensel. So
yeah, Brian Boyle on that team is of no consequence.
No. But you've also seen what ex-Rangers do.
That's fair. So you're right on there. I don't know if he's kind of the same ilk, but I hear you on that one.
I'm sorry, Brian, but I can be a bit of a worrywart at times.
Listen, I say this all the time. The playoffs are not fun for me. It is pure stress and pure nausea until it's over. So I get it. I am always looking for what is going to go wrong. We are Rangers fans. We are conditioned to expect that. So again, the games, it's not enjoyment. I'm literally wanting to throw up for 3 hours. Like, that's what I do.
It's enjoyment.
It is what it is, and I can't help the way I'm wired. So
yeah, no, I mean, it's a lot of it's a great feeling though to actually be in it. I'd say since really the lockout, if you take out the last couple of years, the Rangers have actually been probably one of the most consistent teams in all of hockey. If you really think about it, they've been in it just about every year except the last couple when they've been rebuilding. And Hank had brought this up too on one of our shows. It's like it's very rare for a team to go from one Vezina goaltender to possibly another one, and that's what the Rangers did here. Luck or whatever, but
like the 49ers going from Montana to Young and the Packers going from Favre to Rodgers.
Yeah, I mean, it's you don't see it that often even in hockey for sure. But so with a few hours to go before face-off, Brian, so after you factor all this in, what do you think your prediction for the series?
Look, they're the heavy. I know the betting odds are very, very even. I think I read a stat with MGM that like 95% of the money is on the Rangers. That scares the daylights out of me because that is not good. Like, that means, does the public have it wrong? The public tends to have it wrong a lot, and that is giving me some pause here. But again, this is the matchup that everybody wanted because they played this team very well in the regular season. Now, having said all that, we all remember in 1994, the Rangers were 6-0 against the Devils in the regular season. Come playoff time, it took double overtime of the 7th game to squeak through. So that is not a harbinger of the other, but this is probably the best matchup they could have asked for. I think, the irony is, as star-studded as Pittsburgh has been throughout the last 15 years, call it, I would say the Rangers have more stars right now. And it's a very different place than the team was just a couple of years ago. Full credit to John Davidson, Jeff Gorton, who are no longer here, and Chris Drury, who is. Again, they've added a ridiculous ton of talent to this team, and it's in a much, much better place than they found it. And that's the comparison to those 13, 14, 15 teams that had that rock solid goaltender, which they have again, but they didn't have the offensive jump that this team does. I think it's a good matchup. I think they win the series in 5 or 6 games. I lean 6 because something always goes stupid in the playoffs. You lose a game you have no business losing. Mm-hmm. They could get it done in 5, and it wouldn't really surprise me. But again, if they cannot score at 5-on-5, it could easily go the other way. And I think that they need game 1 more than Pittsburgh needs game 1. I think that they need to take the bull. You don't want it. It is a young team for the most part. I mean, it's still led by true legitimate NHL star players that are 29, 30 years old. But if you lose game 1, I think doubt starts to creep in a bit, especially because you've pretty much owned this team all year. Rangers win game 1, I feel very good about that. Pittsburgh's still a very proud team, not going to lay down and die. 6 is probably it. I really hate picking teams to win the series on the road, but whatever. It's 5 or 6 for me. And again, if not, I also then put myself, if it gets to a 7th game in the Garden, am I really going to pick either Jari or DeSmith, whoever's playing, over Igor in a must-win game? Is that the homer in me talking? Yeah, maybe, but I just don't see that. Like, I would take Hank Lundqvist in a 7th game against anybody. So Igor's getting there, and again, he's not done it in the postseason. Has had a chance to. This is his shot. I think they win the series in no more than 6 games. If it gets to 7, I think they have the advantage. If they end up losing, I'll be disappointed. But again, they're ahead of schedule, so you really can't be. Again, better days are still on the horizon. So, like, I tell Ranger fans, you can't always live and die in the moment. I know it's hard and it sucks, but if they don't get through the series, it's going to be okay. If they do and things break right, they could find themselves relatively deep. Again, they have the goaltending. The Rangers have gotten further with worse skaters and a good goaltender. So we've seen this movie before.
Yeah,
it might be a sequel. So again, I'm not going to say there's going to be a King and Heroes parade this year, but I mean, everything's going right. I mean, can you really be upset no matter what happens here with this team? I mean, they shouldn't be this good this quickly. They shouldn't.
Totally. Absolutely.
Yeah, no, 100%. I'll take it. And trying to remember what the other thing I was going to say. Well, oh, right. Yeah, no, I wanted to piggyback off what you said about the young players. So I was texting with one of my friends like a couple hours before we went live. Like, he was telling me that, like, if there was one thing he was nervous about, it was a lot of these young players not having the experience, which, and by the way, I don't disagree with him entirely. I think he makes a good point, but I countered with him by telling him, hey, I actually think that could be used to their advantage, because a lot of these guys don't really know what it's like to play on a playoff. Like, they're going to be like young, hungry, and eager to compete. So I think really it should be interesting to see one way or the other. What's your take on this, Brian?
Very much a why not us type team. You know, again, it's the youth is there, but it's weird though. I mean, everybody says, "Oh, look at the young Rangers." Look at the top scorers on the team. It's Artemi Panarin and Chris Kreider and Mika Zibanejad. These are not 21, 22, 23-year-old kids, right? So, yes, Adam Fox is an absolute stud, and he's 23, 24. And then Keandre Miller with just an unbelievable breakout season in so many ways. I mean, and you're still kind of waiting for the best version of Lafreniere and Kakko. So it's like, it's not, they're a young team, but they're not entirely like led the way.
Yeah.
David Quinn mentioned this on a podcast. He was on Cam and Strick a couple of months ago, talking about, Lafreniere and Kakko, because it was always, they're going to be busts, that, and the third. And he said something to the effect of, usually teams that pick high in the draft stink. So those players come in, they immediately get top 6 minutes and power play time and all that opportunity that you can't do. You can't give Kakko and Lafreniere top 6 time when you have a Zibanejad and a Kreider and a Strome and a Panarin. These teams don't get top picks. So there's always this talk of, are these guys bust because they're not doing what Austin Matthews did and what Connor McDavid did and what Jack Hughes is even doing across the river. And again, I think it's unfair to expect that given the opportunity that they're given. And Lafreniere finished with 19 goals. I don't think he got 1 in the power play. So they're okay. So I hear what you're saying is, youth and inexperience sometimes works in your favor. You don't know better. You don't know that you're not supposed to be, leading a charge to the conference final, whatever. You're just playing hockey. So it cuts both ways. I mean, like I said, if this doesn't end well and it ends short, it's not going to be the end of the world. It's going to be disappointing in the short term, but you get over it. It is experience for the kids. But at the same time, they have a really nice mix. Like, I think you have elite young talent, elite age-appropriate talent, defense, depth, goaltending, very much a complete team. And, as much as I fought this whole, you need grit, this, that, and a third, they didn't go out there and fill their bottom 6 full of guys like Ryan Reeves. You can have one, that's okay. Barclay Goodrow has actually been an invaluable addition. And I was wrong dead on that side. I didn't like the contract. I didn't like anything about it. It's worked out so far. There's 5 more years to go. We'll see where that ends up. But again, they have their leadership. They have their group. So they may not have a captain, but they might have like 6 of them. So it's okay. I'm not worried about their quote unquote inexperience. I think that's not going to be a factor. Like I said, I think where that might come in is if you go down in a series, how do you react? That might be the storyline from a youth perspective.
A little adversity. Let's see how that all works out. Well, we will find out. They get started in just a few hours, and hopefully they will have a deep run And like you said, if they even get swept, I think this has been a very successful season for sure. And I think they're set up for a very, very long time. Brian Attard, host of the Sports Box, the Blue Truth, on there as well, joining us here on the show today. Brian, thanks so much for joining us. And, hopefully if the Rangers do have a deep run, we'll have you back on and hopefully talk to you in late May or early June.
I would love to have that conversation.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, thanks so much for joining us today, Absolutely. Brian. We appreciate it.